The scent of Kenyan peaberry coffee and artisanal pastries hung thick in the air of La Vostra, a cafe so exclusive it felt more like a private lounge in central Manhattan. It was quiet. That 2 o'clock in the afternoon lull when the city took a collective breath. Marble-topped tables gleamed under soft, recessed lighting, and the hushed murmurs of the few remaining patrons were a gentle counterpoint to the distant hum of traffic. Natalie Green moved through this space like a ghost, slender to the point of seeming fragile. She kept her light brown hair pulled back in a severe bun, her uniform pristine. She was the perfect employee, efficient, silent, and utterly unmemorable. She refilled a water glass, cleared a plate, and wiped down the gleaming espresso machine, all with an economy of motion that spoke of long practice. She lived for this quiet, this anonymity. It was a shield, built brick by boring brick, against a past that felt like it belonged to another person, a past she had buried 6 feet deep. She had just finished serving a final round of drinks to a table of regulars, their low laughter a comfortable sound. When the front door's brass bell chimed, the sound was wrong. It was too harsh, a jangle of metal that cut through the calm. 3 men stepped inside. They did not belong. They were not Wall Street traders or uptown socialites. Their suits were cheap and hung poorly, designed to conceal rather than impress. The first one, a broad man with a flattened nose, stayed by the door, his eyes scanning the room with a predatory flatness. The other 2 began to walk forward. A ripple of tension passed through the cafe. A patron lowered his newspaper. A barista paused, milk steamer in hand. Natalie felt it in her bones before she saw it. A cold prickle at the base of her spine, an old, unwelcome hum of adrenaline. She kept her head down, polishing a glass, her body angled toward the bar. The 2 men were not heading for a table. They were walking directly toward the back booth, a space reserved, by unspoken rule, for the owner. Sitting there, as he did most afternoons, was Dominic Carmine. He was a man carved from granite, with a jaw that looked like it could break concrete and eyes as cold and dark as the espresso in his cup. His black hair was cut short, military style, to the staff. He was Mr. Carmine, the demanding but fair proprietor, to the rest of the city. He was a whisper, a shadow, the head of an organization that did not officially exist. The leader of the 2 thugs, a thin man with a scar pulling at his lip, reached inside his coat. Time stopped. Natalie saw the sequence of events before they happened. The bulge under the man's arm, the shift in his weight, the flicker of intent in his eyes as he locked onto Dominic. He was going for a gun. He was not going to make it. Natalie did not think. She did not plan. She reacted. Her hand, the one polishing the glass, dropped below the counter to the magnetic strip that held the kitchen implements. Her fingers bypassed the bread knife and the cleaver, closing instead around the balanced, solid hilt of a 6-inch utility knife used for quartering lemons. In one fluid, devastatingly simple motion, she brought her arm up, her body uncoiling, her wrist snapped forward. The knife left her hand. It did not wobble. It flew true, a silver streak across the opulent room. There was a wet, percussive thunk. The man with the scar screamed, a high, strangled sound. He stared in disbelief at his right forearm, where the knife was now embedded, pinning his jacket sleeve to the muscle and sinew beneath. The heavy, blued steel pistol that had been in his hand clattered loudly onto the polished marble floor, skittering to a stop near a potted orchid. The cafe erupted. A woman shrieked. Patrons scrambled under tables. The second thug froze, his hand halfway inside his own jacket, his eyes wide with disbelief. The man at the door fumbled, unsure whether to run or draw his own weapon. And in the back booth, Dominic Carmine slowly, very slowly placed his espresso cup back on its saucer. The small clink of porcelain on porcelain was the loudest sound in the sudden, terrified silence. He did not look at the man screaming, clutching his bleeding arm. He did not look at the other 2 intruders, who were now backing away. terror replacing their aggression. His gaze, sharp as a stiletto, moved past them all. It settled on the slender, pale-faced waitress who stood behind the bar, her hand still slightly raised, her breathing shallow. She looked terrified, but her stance was perfect, balanced, ready. No one spoke. No one understood what they had just seen. A waitress. A girl who served coffee. How could she throw a knife like that? How could she move that fast? Dominic Carmine's eyes narrowed. He looked at Natalie Green, really looked at her for the first time in the year she had worked for him. He saw the tremor in her hands, but he also saw the lethal precision that still lingered in her form. The question hung in the air, heavy and dangerous as a loaded gun. Who the hell was she? The chaos was immediate, but Dominic Carmine's men were faster. 2 guards, previously invisible in tailored suits near the entrance, moved with terrifying efficiency. They were on the remaining 2 thugs before they could decide to fight or flee. There was the sound of heavy, practiced violence, short and brutal, ending with 2 bodies slumping to the floor. The man at the door was already unconscious. The one Natalie had pinned was sobbing, clutching his arm. Through it all, Dominic Carmine did not move from his booth. His authority was a physical presence in the room, a heavy blanket that smothered the panic. His voice cut through the whimpers of the patrons. "Sal," he said, his voice a low rumble, never rising, yet it carried to every corner. A man in an impeccably cut Brioni suit, who'd been sitting at the bar, materialized at his side. "Boss. Get them out. Back entrance. Clean this up." Dominic's eyes flicked to the terrified patrons. "Everyone's meal is compensated. Apologize for the disturbance." The kitchen had a small grease fire. A new employee panicked. The lie was so smooth, so utterly flat, that it was almost believable. His manager, Sal, nodded once and began orchestrating the cleanup, his men moving to calm the guests, guide them out, and handle the 3 intruders who were now being dragged like sacks of flour toward the back. Dominic Carmine was a man of absolute control. His empire, built on shadows and steel, stretched across New York's underbelly and reached into its most legitimate boardrooms. He was a second-generation boss, inheriting the name but earning the fear all on his own. He was V-shaped, broad-shouldered, and always moved with a deliberate, lethal grace. His security was legendary. No one got close. No one breached his perimeter. Until today, 3 low-level enforcers from the Russo family he recognized the scar on the leader. A punk named Frankie Salvo had just waltzed into his sanctuary, armed. That was a problem. That was a failure of his intelligence. But that was not the problem consuming his thoughts. His cold, dark eyes, the kind that made grown men stammer, were fixed on the woman behind the bar, Natalie Green. He had the file, 28 years old, from somewhere upstate, flawless, boring work history, a few college credits, quiet, kept to herself, lived in a small apartment in Queens. She had been vetted, as everyone was, a simple, clean background check. A background check that had failed to mention she could disarm a gunman with a thrown lemon knife from 20 feet. The adrenaline had left Natalie as quickly as it had come, leaving a hollow, sickening cold in its place. Her hands were shaking now, a violent, uncontrollable tremor. She gripped the edge of the sink, her knuckles white, her breathing ragged. She had done it. After 3 years of perfect monastic stillness, 3 years of being no one, she had blown her cover in the most spectacular way possible. She could still feel the weight of the knife in her hand, the perfect, familiar balance. The training flooded back, unbidden, the scent of gun oil and sweat, the screaming drill instructors at the range, the weight of body armor in a humid, dusty hellscape thousands of miles from home. She had been a weapon, honed and sharpened by the United States government, a ghost who could move through shadows and end threats. And then came the event, the fire, the screams, the betrayal. The moment her world had burned down, leaving nothing but ashes and a guilt so profound it had choked her. She had run. She had buried that woman, that operative, and become Natalie Green, The girl who served coffee. She had just dug that grave wide open. Footsteps on the marble floor, heavy, expensive Italian leather. They stopped in front of her. She forced herself to look up. He was even more imposing up close. Dominic Carmine was a solid wall of muscle and menace, draped in a suit that probably cost more than her apartment. He loomed over her, not just in height, but in sheer presence. His eyes were not just dark, they were voids, assessing, calculating, and utterly unreadable. He did not ask if she was all right. He did not thank her. His voice, when it came, was deep and resonant, a quiet command. My office. He turned and walked toward a door marked private at the back of the cafe. He did not look back to see if she was following. He knew she would. Natalie's legs felt like jelly. She wiped her shaking hands on her apron, then untied it, letting it fall to the floor. Every instinct screamed at her to run. Out the front door, onto the street, disappear back into the anonymity she craved. But she knew it was too late. Men like Dominic Carmine did not allow for loose ends. Running would only confirm she had something to hide. She followed him. The office was in stark contrast to the warm cafe. It was modern, Spartan, and cold. Shades of gray and chrome, a single massive desk. The windows overlooked a private, walled garden. Dominic was standing by the window, his back to her. "Sit," Anne, he commanded, not turning. Natalie sat in one of the 2 leather chairs facing his desk. For a full minute, he said nothing. The only sound was the faint ticking of a desk clock. He was letting the silence work on her, letting her fear build. Finally, he turned. He fixed her with that unnerving stare. "The file I have on Natalie Green says she was a barista in Syracuse and a part-time student in community college. It says she's an orphan. It says she is, for all intents and purposes, nobody." He took a step toward the desk, leaning on it with his knuckles. "That file, it seems, is a lie." Natalie's throat was dry. "It was a panic. I don't know what happened. I just threw it." Dominic's lips twitched, a motion that held no humor. "You threw it. You threw a 6-inch blade from a dead stop across a room and hit a moving target's forearm with enough precision to disarm him without severing the artery. You panicked." He said the word as if it tasted foul. He studied her, his gaze an almost physical weight. He was intrigued. In his world, people were predictable. They were either sheep or they were wolves. He had never seen a sheep do that. He was undeniably, intensely drawn to this contradiction. The quiet, fragile-looking woman who had just saved his life with the casual violence of a seasoned killer. "I need to know who you are," he said, his voice dropping again, softer now, but more dangerous. "Not what the paper says. Who you are. Who trained you." Natalie said nothing, her heart hammering against her ribs. He sighed, pushing off the desk. He walked around it and sat in his high-backed chair. He looked at her, and for the first time, his gaze was not just calculating, it was appreciative. I don't like anomalies, Natalie," he said, "and you are the biggest one to walk into my life in a very long time. I have a problem. Someone in my organization failed today. Someone let those 3 Pagliacci into my place of business. And you were the one who stopped it." He leaned forward, lacing his fingers. "I find myself in a difficult position. I cannot have a person with your talents serving coffee. I also cannot have you walking out that door, not until I know exactly what you are." He paused, letting the implication hang in the air. "So, here is what is going to happen. Your employment at La Vostra is terminated." Natalie's stomach dropped. "You start a new job," he continued, as if she had not reacted. "For me, personally, I'm going to find out what you know, and in return, I'll keep you safe." "Safe from what?" she whispered, her voice hoarse. Dominic almost smiled. "From me, and from the people who will now be very, very interested in the waitress who stopped the Russo family from putting a bullet in my head." He saw the fear in her eyes, but also a flicker of something else. Defiance. Strength. He was right. She was not a sheep. "You will be at my estate tonight, 8 o'clock. Sal will give you the details." He looked down at some papers. A clear dismissal. "Do not be late." The black town car cut through the night, silent and imposing. Natalie sat in the back, her hands clasped so tightly her knuckles were white. Sal, Dominic's quiet, watchful lieutenant, sat in the passenger seat, a bulkhead of muscle and loyalty. They had not spoken a word since leaving her small Queens apartment, where she had been given exactly 10 minutes to pack a bag. She had grabbed her toothbrush, a change of clothes, and the solid, heavy lump of her savings from under a loose floorboard. The car passed through massive, wrought-iron gates, ascending a long, winding drive that Natalie had not known existed within the city. The Carmine estate was not a house. It was a fortress, a sprawling stone manor that loomed against the dark skyline, its windows glowing like embers. She was escorted inside, not to a guest room, but to a suite of rooms that was larger than her entire apartment. It was beautiful, all silk and dark wood, but the door closed behind her with a soft, definitive click that sounded exactly like a lock. Her life of anonymity was over. Her quiet, boring, safe life had been incinerated by the throw of a single knife. She was left alone for 2 hours, the silence stretching her nerves thin. When the summons came, it was via an intercom. "Mister, Carmine will see you in the study." The study was a room of shadows and leather. Dominic Carmine stood in front of a cold fireplace, a glass of amber liquid in his hand. He had changed from his suit into a simple black knit shirt and dark trousers. The casual clothes only made him look more dangerous, the power coiling in his shoulders and chest. "The men you encountered today," he began, his voice calm, "were from the Russo family." Natalie remained silent by the door, refusing to sit. He swirled the glass. "For 5 years, we've had an arrangement. They control the docks, I control the city's logistics, a neat line. Their new boss, Marco Russo, is young, ambitious, and stupid. He thinks the line is a suggestion. Today, he tried to cross it." He finally looked at her, his eyes pinning her in place. "He failed because of you. He will not be happy about that. He will want to know who you are. And when he finds out you are a waitress, he will be confused, and then he will be angry. And then he will try to remove you, to fix his mistake." "This has nothing to do with me," Natalie said, her voice a low, tight wire. "I am not your concern. I am not part of your world. I just want to leave." "You were not part of my world at 2 o'clock, he countered, taking a step toward her. "At 2 o'clock in 1 second, when your hand went for that knife. You bought a permanent, front-row ticket. You cannot stand by when innocent people are in danger. Is that it?" The question hit her like a physical blow. It was too close to the truth, too close to the reasons she had left her old life. "I am not a soldier anymore." "I do not care what you were," Dominic said, his voice dropping. "I care about what you are, and right now, you are a target, which makes you my problem." He had trapped her. She was a pawn in a game she had tried so desperately to quit. She felt a surge of cold fury at him, at the Russos, but mostly at herself. A week passed. Natalie was a prisoner in paradise. She ate the finest food, slept on sheets with a thread count she could not comprehend, and was watched every second of every day. Dominic, however, left her alone. He was testing her, letting her stew in the luxurious cage he had built. Then, on the 8th day, he came to her suite. "We are going out." "I'm not going anywhere with you." That was not a request. They were in the subterranean garage of one of his downtown high-rises, a sterile, concrete labyrinth. Sal was driving, with 2 other guards in a follow car. Dominic had been on a call, his voice a low, angry buzz of Italian. Natalie was staring out the window, counting the ways she could escape. As the car slowed to approach the exit ramp, a black sedan, identical to theirs, pulled up from a side lane, blocking their path. Sal swore, his hand moving inside his jacket. Dominic's call stopped. He simply said, "Now." It happened instantly. The follow car was blocked by a panel van that screeched across the lane. The doors of the black sedan flew open. 3 men in dark tactical gear, carrying short-barreled rifles, emerged. This was not a warning. This was an execution. Natalie did not scream. Her training, buried under 3 years of trauma, surged to the surface, clean and cold. "Reverse," she yelled at Sal. "Back left, blind spot." But the first rounds were already hitting the armored glass, spider-webbing the windshield. Sal stomped on the accelerator, throwing the heavy car backward, but another car was already there, pinning them. "Dominic, out!" she commanded, grabbing his arm. He was already moving. He kicked his door open, using it as a shield, and began firing a handgun that had appeared in his hand. Sal returned fire from the driver's side. Natalie yanked the rear door handle. She moved low, shoving Dominic toward a massive concrete support pillar. "Cover!" Bullets chewed the concrete where they had been seconds before. The air was thick with the smell of cordite and pulverized cement. One of the gunmen broke from cover, flanking them, his rifle swinging toward them. Dominic raised his weapon, but he was too slow. Natalie moved. She did not have a knife. She did not have a gun. She grabbed a heavy-duty fire extinguisher from the wall mount and threw herself forward, not at the gunman, but at Dominic. She slammed into him, pushing him hard against the pillar as the extinguisher she held took the first bullet. The metal exploding outward, the force of the impact drove the air from her lungs. They were pinned. The firefight was deafening, a roar of close-quarters combat as Dominic's other guards engaged. Natalie was crushed between the concrete and the solid, unyielding wall of Dominic Carmine's body. His arms were around her. One hand splayed on the pillar above her head, the other gripping her waist, holding her to him as a human shield. But he was not shielding himself. He was shielding her. His body covered hers completely. She could feel the hard planes of his chest, the frantic thud of his heart, or maybe it was hers. She could not tell. His face was inches from hers, his dark eyes ablaze. The smell of his cologne, sharp and expensive, filled her senses. He was breathing hard, his gaze locked on hers. He was not looking at the fight. He was looking at her, at the woman who had just used a fire extinguisher as a piece of body armor. "Stay down," he growled, the vibration of his voice moving through her. The shooting stopped, replaced by shouts and then a heavy, ringing silence. Dominic did not move. His hold on her was absolute, possessive. He was still assessing her, but the calculation in his eyes was gone, replaced by something hotter, something raw and undisciplined. He felt her, tense and alive in his arms. She was not a civilian. She was not a victim. She was, he realized, the most dangerous thing in this garage, and she was his. She realized it too. She was not afraid of the guns. She was terrified of the feeling of his body against hers, the undeniable, magnetic pull, and the horrifying realization that in this moment of pure violence, pressed against a mafia boss, she had not felt this alive in 3 years. The armored town car sped through the Manhattan streets, a silent black shark in a river of yellow cabs. The silence inside was absolute, a heavy, charged void that replaced the ringing in Natalie's ears. She sat opposite Dominic, not beside him. His men, Sal included, were in a separate follow car, dealing with the aftermath, the bodies, the vehicles, the police that would be paid not to show up. They were alone. The garage incident had shattered the fragile barrier of her anonymity. He had seen the weapon she truly was, and she had seen him, in that moment, pressed against the concrete. He had not been a civilian to be protected. He had been a partner, a man who understood the geometry of a firefight, a man who had used his own body to shield hers. "Sal is taking you to a different location," he said finally, his voice rough. The car turned, not toward the estate, but toward the heart of the city. The estate is compromised. The fact that the Russos knew my afternoon schedule is a problem. The fact that they knew my route from the garage is a declaration of war. They did not speak again until they arrived at a private, unmarked elevator in a luxury high-rise. It opened directly into a sprawling penthouse. It was not a home. It was a sterile, minimalist fortress of glass and steel. 30 stories above the noise, the city lights were a glittering carpet below them. Dominic bypassed the lights, walking into the main living area, which was lit only by the ambient glow of New York. He moved to a bar and poured 2 glasses of whiskey, the sound of the liquid hitting the crystal impossibly loud. He did not offer her one. He simply set it on the counter, knowing she would take it. She did. Her hand, he noted, was perfectly steady. The shaking is gone, and he observed, his back to her. The threat is gone, she replied, her voice flat. The adrenaline is just leveling out. He turned, leaning against the counter, his large frame silhouetted against the window. In that garage, you were not panicked. You were not even scared. You were operational. The word hung in the air, a military term, an accusation. I need to know, he said, his voice a low command. Not the lie you built, the truth, who trained you. Natalie stared into the amber liquid. The silence stretched. She had protected this secret for 3 years. It was the only thing she had left. But the man in front of her, who had just put his body between her and a bullet, was not asking. He was demanding. And he, of all people, had earned an answer. You call it training, she said, her voice barely a whisper. We called it selection. A government agency that does not officially exist. He nodded slowly. Military? Worse, intelligence support. We were the ghosts, the unit they sent in when the SEALs were too loud. We specialized in removal, extraction, making problems disappear. She took a drink. It burned, but it was a familiar burn. I was the best they had. A shadow crossed her face, so deep it looked like a bruise. We got compromised, a mission in Aleppo, bad intelligence, or maybe a mole. It was an ambush, a slaughter. I was the only one who walked out. Her voice was thick with a guilt that was still fresh. They wanted to give me a medal for survival. I saw it for what it was, a failure. I lost my entire team. I lost the people I was sent to protect. So I ran. I buried that person. I became Natalie Green, the woman who serves coffee, the woman who is too meek to look you in the eyes. I came here to be invisible. Dominic listened, his expression unreadable, but his eyes were filled with a profound, startling understanding. He pushed himself off the counter and walked closer. Invisible, he repeated, the word tasting like acid. I have never had that luxury. My father left me this. He gestured, not to the room, but to the entire city sparkling below them. This throne. It is the loneliest place on earth. You are surrounded by 100 men who will die for you, but you cannot trust a single one of them. Every smile is a calculation. Every handshake is a test. You cannot show weakness. You cannot connect. He stopped, standing directly in front of her, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his body. And then today, in that garage, pressed against the concrete, I was not alone. I looked at you, and you were not a civilian. You were not a sheep. You were the only other person in that room who understood the cost. The admission hung between them, more intimate than any touch. The air in the dark room was thick, charged with their shared confessions. He had seen her violence, and she had just seen his vulnerability. You are drawn to it, she whispered, her voice trembling, not with fear, but with a terrible recognition. You are not like them. You are like me. No, he growled, his voice dropping. I am not, but I think you are like me. He reached out his hand. He did not try to touch her face or her waist. He simply held his hand out, palm up. A question, an offer. After a long second, she put her glass down. Slowly, she raised her hand and placed it in his. His fingers closed around hers. It was not a gentle, romantic clasp. It was a grip of possession, of grounding. His thumb stroked once over her knuckles. In that single, simple contact, the world outside the window, the war with the Russos, the ghosts of Aleppo, the crushing weight of his empire, all of it dissolved. For one single, breathless moment, there was only the darkness of the room, the texture of his skin against hers, and the shared, silent understanding of two people who had lived their entire lives in the crosshairs. The moment shattered. A muffled thud echoed from the direction of the private elevator, not the sound of its arrival, but the sound of metal protesting. Dominic's head snapped toward the door. He released her hand, and in the same motion, a pistol was in his. "They knew," he whispered, a cold fury in his voice. "They did not just follow us, they knew." The reinforced steel door of the penthouse exploded inward, blown off its hinges by a precise breaching charge. "Down," Dominic roared, grabbing Natalie and hurling them both behind the thick, marble-topped bar. A split second later, 2 flashbang grenades rolled into the room, detonating with a blinding, deafening concussion. Even as her senses screamed, Natalie's training took over. "4-man team," she yelled over the ringing in her ears. 2 by the door, 2 advancing. A hail of automatic gunfire erupted, tearing the room apart, glass shattered, expensive furniture disintegrated into stuffing and splinters. The bullets hammered against the marble bar, chipping away chunks of stone. One of the gunmen, dressed in full black tactical gear, rounded the corner of the bar, his rifle raising. Natalie was already pushing to her feet, moving toward her own escape vector. The man centered his weapon on her. "No," Dominic yelled. He did not just push her. He did not just shield her. He lunged, wrapping his entire body around hers, using his own armored vest and sheer mass to cover her completely. He slammed her back against the solid cabinetry beneath the bar, his arms caging her, his head tucked over hers. He grunted as several rounds pounded into his back. The impacts were brutal, driving the air from his lungs, but his vest held. He was trapped, his back to the enemy, to protect her. "Move!" she screamed, trapped beneath his weight. He did not move. He was a solid wall of protection, a man making a conscious choice to take the fire meant for her. He pressed his face against the side of her head, his breathing harsh in her ear. "They came for me," he ground out, the words a pained, furious promise. "They will not have you." He shoved her violently toward the end of the bar. "Go kitchen solid wall." He rolled away, coming up on one knee, his pistol barking twice. The gunman who had rounded the corner dropped. But 2 more were advancing, firing from the cover of the doorway. They were pinned. The apartment was a kill box, and they were on the wrong end of it. The penthouse was a vortex of flying glass and splinters. The air thrummed with the high-velocity crack of automatic gunfire. "Kitchen," Dominic roared again, shoving her. Natalie moved, her body low, her mind a cold, clear processor. She registered the tactical layout 2 gunmen by the shattered elevator door, laying down suppression fire. 1, the man Dominic had shot, was down. That left at least 1 more, moving, flanking. "Left!" she screamed, just as the 4th gunman appeared from the hallway, his rifle swinging toward Dominic. Dominic spun, firing, but the man was already spraying. Natalie, instead of running to the kitchen, launched herself, not at Dominic, but at a heavy, abstract bronze statue on a pedestal. She slammed her shoulder into it, toppling the 300-pound piece of art directly into the gunman's path. He stumbled, his burst of fire going wild, stitching the ceiling. It gave Dominic the half-second he needed. 3 precise shots, and the 4th man collapsed. Silence. Heavy, ringing silence, filled with the smell of gunpowder and the faint, distant scream of a car alarm 30 stories below. Dominic was breathing hard, his pistol still up, scanning the breach. "Stay down," he commanded. But Natalie was already moving toward the last gunman, the one Dominic had shot. She kicked his rifle away, her hand dropping to his neck, checking his pulse. "He's alive. We need one alive." Dominic stared at her. His penthouse was destroyed. He had just survived a 4-man hit team, an assassination squad, and this woman, this ex-operative, was already securing a prisoner. He strode over, his face a mask of cold fury, and looked down at the man. He did not recognize him. Russo's men. They fight like animals. No, Natalie said, her voice sharp. She was patting the man down, her hands moving with professional detachment. They do not... Look at their gear. That's military-grade body armor, not cheap aftermarket steel. Look at their formation. Breaching charge, flashbangs, 4-man stack, flanking. This wasn't a Russo hit. This was professional. This was... one of yours. The words hit Dominic harder than the bullets. He looked again. Really looked. She was right. The precision, the execution, the intelligence. They knew his private elevator code. They knew this safe house. The Russos were stupid. This was not stupid. This was betrayal. This was from the inside. A cold, bottomless rage, colder than anything he had ever felt, settled in his gut. "Sal," he said, pulling his phone. "Penthouse, it's done. No, not Russo's. Someone inside. Get me. Get me to the dock warehouse. Now. And bring everyone." The ride to the Red Hook warehouse was a silent scream of tension. They were in a new armored car, one of a 3-car convoy. Dominic was a statue of contained violence, his jaw set so tight it looked like it might crack. Natalie sat beside him, her mind racing. This was it. The moment she had run from the betrayal, the mole, the feeling of being surrounded by enemies you thought were allies. They arrived at the massive, corrugated steel warehouse. The convoy pulled inside, the huge doors groaning shut behind them, sealing them in the cavernous, dimly lit space. Sal and 10 of Dominic's most trusted men were already there, forming a perimeter. "The prisoner is in the office," Sal said, his face grim. "He's not talking." "He will," Dominic growled, stepping out of the car. It happened as his foot hit the concrete. A high-pitched, terrifying hiss came from the rafters above. Natalie looked up. Her blood went cold. It was not a sound. It was a device. "Dominic, no!" she screamed. It was not a bomb. It was a trap. From the dark, steel beams high above, 2 men in harnesses dropped, rappelling down like spiders, automatic weapons blazing, not at the guards, but at one single target, Dominic Carmine. Simultaneously, 2 of the guards Sal had brought men Dominic had known for a decade spun, their own weapons turning not outward but inward, firing on their loyal counterparts. It was a perfectly executed pincer movement. Betrayal. Sal went down in the first volley. Clutching his chest, the other loyal guards were cut down, caught completely by surprise. Dominic was exposed, his pistol useless against 4 rifles. He dove back toward the car, but the 2 men who had turned traitor were advancing, firing. Natalie saw it all in a frozen, terrible clarity. One of the traitors, a man she recognized from the estate, raised his rifle for a clean, final shot at Dominic, who was trapped in the open. She did not think. She did not calculate. She just moved. She sprinted from the cover of the car, launching her body, her only thought to cover him, to shield him. She slammed into Dominic, her arms wrapping around his head, pulling him down just as the rifle fired. The sound was a flat, ugly thwack. A white-hot, searing agony exploded in her left shoulder. It was a pain so profound, so absolute, it stole her breath and her sight. She felt the impact throw her backward, felt Dominic's hands grab her, his roar of fury a distant, meaningless sound. She hit the ground, the concrete cold against her cheek. The firefight was over in seconds. She heard Dominic's gun, firing again and again, a desperate, raging cannonade. Then, nothing. Just his voice, screaming her name. "Natalie, Natalie, no, 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 enough." He was kneeling over her, his hands pressing down on her shoulder. His suit jacket already soaked in her blood, his face, that cold, impassive mask of a boss, was gone. In its place was a man wild with terror. You're okay," He was chanting, his voice breaking, "Stay with me! Stay me!" She tried to speak. All that came out was a gasp. The world was shrinking. The light in the vast warehouse collapsing into a single, dark point. She had done it again. She had stepped in front of the bullet. She had tried to save someone. But the realization that struck her as the darkness took her was a cold, pure terror. It was not duty this time. She had not saved a colleague. She had shielded the man The darkness swallowed the thought. When she woke, the world was white, soft, and smelled of antiseptic. She was in a bed, not in a hospital, but in a room that looked like a high-end hotel, but with the quiet, sterile hum of medical equipment. Dominic was in a chair by the bed. He had not slept. He had not changed. His expensive shirt was still stained dark with her blood. He was staring at her, his face a ruin of exhaustion, guilt, and a raw, possessive intensity that terrified her. "The doctor said the bullet went clean through," he said, his voice a rasp. "It missed the artery. You will be fine." Natalie tried to move, and a fresh wave of fire shot through her shoulder. She winced, falling back. The memory hit her, the warehouse, the betrayal, the pain, the look on his face. She started to cry. They were not tears of pain. They were tears of pure, unadulterated fear. She had finally done it. She had found something she was more afraid of losing than her own life. This man, this killer, this world of violence she had run from. She was in love with him, and it was going to be the death of her. "What is it?" he demanded, moving to the edge of the bed, his hands clenching. "The pain, I will get the doctor." "No," she whispered, the tears streaming down her face. "You do not get it, do you?" She looked at him, her eyes clear and broken. "I spent 3 years running from this, from caring. Caring gets people killed, my team. They died because I cared, and now—" She choked on a sob. "I did not save you because it was my job. Dominic, I am not your soldier. I did it because I. She could not say it. He understood. He sat on the edge of the bed, his movements careful. He reached out, his hand shaking, and gently brushed the tears from her cheek with his thumb. "I know," he said, his voice thick. "I know, and they will pay." "I am not afraid of them," she wept, her voice trembling. "I'm afraid of this. I am afraid of you. I'm afraid of what you have made me feel. I cannot leave you, Dominic. And I know. It is going to get me killed." He leaned in, his forehead resting against hers. His own eyes were closed, his face etched with an agony that mirrored hers. He had been a boss, a son, a king. He had never in his entire life been this. "Then they will have to go through me," he whispered, his voice a vow, a prayer in the sterile room. "You are not leaving, and you are not dying. You are mine. You saved me, Natalie, and now I am going to save you." He did not just mean from the Russos or from the traitors in his midst. He meant from the ghosts, from the past, from the fear. He was admitting it in the only way he knew how. She was his, and he was, God help him, hers. The 2 weeks of Natalie's recovery were the calm before a catastrophic storm. The secure, sterile room Dominic had moved her to, an underground medical bay beneath one of his anonymous corporate properties, became a war room. Her shoulder, meticulously repaired by a surgeon who asked no questions, ached with a dull, persistent fire. But it was a fire that was fading. The one in Dominic Carmine's eyes was only just beginning to ignite. He was not the same man. The cool, calculating detachment of the boss was gone, replaced by the contained, focused fury of a man betrayed. He had lost 4 loyal men in the warehouse, including Sal, who was in critical condition. The betrayal by his own captain, a man named Leo Kappa, had cut him deeper than any bullet. "He's been with me for 15 years, Dominic said, his voice a low, gravelly rasp. He was standing over a large, illuminated map of the city, laid out on a steel table. He taught me how to handle my first shipment, and he sold me out for money, for Russo. Natalie, her arm now in a simple black sling, stood on the other side of the table. Russo didn't orchestrate this. Dominic Kappa did. Russo is just the bank. Kappa was the brain. He knew your routes, your safe houses. He knew me. He knew you as a waitress, Dominic countered, his gaze snapping to her. He did not know you. The air in the room was thick with this unspoken truth. The betrayal had cost Dominic his infrastructure, but it had given him one. Single, invaluable asset, a weapon no one, not Russo, not even his own treacherous crew, knew he possessed. Marco Russo is throwing a party, Dominic said, tapping a red circle on the map. At his club, the Silencio, he's celebrating. He thinks I'm crippled. He thinks I'm mourning. He and Kappa are meeting tomorrow night. It's a victory lap. Natalie looked at the blueprints of the club already pulled up on a nearby screen. You want to hit the party? No, Dominic said, his voice dropping. Hitting the party is a war. I cannot win a war until I know how many of my own soldiers will shoot me in the back. This is not about brawn. This is about intelligence. This is a cancer, Natalie. I need to cut it out, and to do that, I need to know exactly how deep it goes. He looked at her, his dark eyes filled with a lethal intensity. Kappa will be there. He'll be comfortable. He'll be arrogant. He will have a laptop, a phone. He will have the names of every other man in my organization who turned. Natalie saw the plan forming, the terrible, beautiful logic of it. You cannot go. Anyone you send, anyone Russo or Kappa recognizes, will be dead before they hit the door. Exactly, Dominic said. He walked around the table. He stood in front of her, close, but not touching. They are looking for wolves. They are looking for soldiers. They are not looking for a ghost. He was asking. It was the first time he had ever truly asked her for anything. He was not commanding his employee. He was speaking to his equal, the operative. He was placing his entire empire, his entire life, in her one good hand. You're asking me to infiltrate, she said, her voice quiet. I'm asking you to be what they trained you to be, he replied, his voice rough with an emotion he could not hide. I am asking you to do the one thing I cannot. I am asking you to be my eyes. She looked at the plans, at the man in front of her, at the sling that represented the price of her loyalty. She had run from this life. She had run from the killing, the betrayal, the cost. And here she was, volunteering to walk right back in. But this time, it was not for a flag. It was for the man who had shielded her with his own body, the man whose blood-stained shirt she had refused to let the medical staff throw away. Okay, she said. The tension in his shoulders did not release. It coiled tighter. You get the data. You find the list. You do not engage. You do not fight. You are intelligence only. Natalie, you get out and you signal me. And then I will bring the war. He reached out, his hand hesitating, as if he was afraid to touch her, as if she were a live wire. His fingers brushed her cheek, a touch so light it was almost imaginary. I have just gotten you back. I will not lose you. The simple, possessive statement, the raw admission of his fear, broke the last of her control. This was not strategy. This was not a mission. This was a precipice. You will not, she whispered. She closed the distance, her good hand coming up to fist in the front of his shirt, pulling his face down to hers. The kiss was not a gentle reassurance. It was a collision. It was brutal, desperate, and filled with the unspeakable tension of the last 2 weeks. It was a clash of teeth and a fight for dominance, a raw, hungry claiming. His hands went to her, one tangled in her hair, the other spanning her waist, pulling her flush against him, crushing her to his chest. He kissed her like he was starving, like he was trying to breathe her in, to memorize the taste of her before she walked into the fire. His mouth was hard, demanding, and she met him with equal force. This was not romance. It was survival. It was 2 people who had lived in violence, recognizing the same, desperate need in each other. It was the acknowledgement that they were both, in their own ways, monsters, and they would not survive without the other. He broke the kiss only to press his mouth to the column of her throat, his breathing ragged against her skin. "I will not lose you," he repeated, the words a growl, a vow. She arched into him, her good arm wrapping around his neck, her fingers digging into his shoulders. "We get through this," she breathed, her voice a promise. "We find the traitors, and we end this together." He pulled back, his eyes dark, his pupils blown wide. He saw his own desperation mirrored in her gaze. He saw the soldier. He saw the woman. He saw the only person on earth he would, or could, ever trust. "Together," he agreed, his voice low. His hand moved from her waist to her injured shoulder, his touch now impossibly gentle, his thumb stroking the curve of her collarbone just above the sling. "But you are not going in alone." He turned back to the table. "You will have an earpiece. I will be in your ear, every step of the way. But my best man, the only one besides you I know is clean, is going in with you. He'll be your backup." "Who?" Natalie asked, confused. Sal was in a hospital. Everyone else was suspect. Dominic picked up a high-end, discreet microphone. He looked at her, a flicker of something almost like a smile in his eyes. "Me?" The air in the surveillance van was thick and hot, smelling of stale coffee and ozone. Natalie sat in the back, a small, virtually invisible earpiece in her ear, across from her. Dominic stared at a bank of 4 monitors, his face a mask of stone. One monitor showed a tactical blueprint of the Silenzio. The other 3 showed what she saw. "You are no longer Natalie Green," he had said to her an hour ago, his hands fastening a simple, elegant diamond pendant around her neck. The pendant held the camera. "You are no one, you are a ghost. You do not exist. Now." His voice was a low, steady murmur in her ear, a grounding force in the chaos she was about to enter. "Audio is live. I have your visual. The front door is too hot, too many of Kappa's men. You're going in the side, through the service entrance. I've bought you a 5-minute window. After that, the door's alarm resets." "I am moving," she whispered, stepping from the van into a dark, urine-soaked alley. She wore a simple, sleeveless black dress, her hair down, her injured arm supported by a fashionable silk shawl that disguised her limited mobility. She looked like just another high roller, lost on her way to the party. She bypassed the lock in under 10 seconds, her one good hand a blur of practiced, precise movements. She slipped inside, the thump of the club's bass vibrating through the steel door. "I am in the kitchen corridor," she breathed, moving past towering shelves of expensive liquor. "Good." Dominic's voice was a physical comfort. "Stay left. There's a security blind spot by the ice machines. I need you on the mezzanine. Kappa's been in the 3rd booth for an hour." She moved through the chaos of the club, a phantom in the strobe lights. The music was a physical assault, a wall of sound that she used as cover. She looked like she belonged, her pace unhurried, her gaze distant. She ascended the glass staircase to the VIP section. 2 guards at the rope, and she murmured, "Russos, they are stupid. Do not engage. Create a distraction," Dominic ordered. Natalie walked near the checkpoint, then paused, as if searching for a friend. She waited until a large, loud hedge fund manager and his entourage pushed toward the guards. In the exact moment he began arguing, Natalie simply slipped under the velvet rope, using his body as a human shield from the guard's line of sight. By the time they had dealt with him, she was gone. "I am on the mezzanine." "I see him." Dominic's voice was suddenly tight, laced with a venom she could feel. "3rd booth, his back is to you. His laptop is on the table." She saw him, Leo Kappa, laughing, his face flushed with champagne, holding court, the man who had betrayed Dominic, who had tried to kill them, who had put the bullet in her shoulder. A cold, professional emptiness settled over her. "The laptop," Dominic said, "that is the mission. Get the data. Get out." "I cannot get to it from here. He's surrounded." "Wait, the waitress. She's bringing a new bottle. Use her." Natalie moved, intercepting the waitress just before she reached the booth. "He is allergic," Natalie said, her voice sharp and authoritative, pointing at Kappa. The waitress froze. What? The champagne. He's with me. He needs the Fuerte tequila, not this. You will kill him. Go, now. She was so convincing, so utterly imperious that the waitress just nodded and hurried away. It gave Natalie 30 seconds. She glided toward the booth, her hand already holding the cloning device. It was the size of a wafer. She moved behind Kappa. "Excuse me," she said, her voice a purr. Kappa turned, annoyed. "What?" Natalie leaned in, her body angled to shield his laptop from his view. She accidentally brushed his shoulder with her silk shawl, her good hand darting down. "I just wanted to know if a man like you was really as dangerous as he looked." He grinned, his eyes raking over her. "Stick around, sweetie, and find out." "Maybe I will," she whispered. Her fingers found the USB port. The device clicked in. A tiny blue light, invisible to him, began to pulse. 1, 2, 3. "Leo," Marco Russo called from across the room. "We toast." Kappa turned, raising his glass, "To new beginnings." Natalie's device pulsed faster. 7, 8, 9. The light turned green. A complete data copy. She pulled it, her hand vanishing back into the folds of her shawl. She smiled at Kappa. "I will be right back." "I will be waiting." She turned and walked. She did not run. "Natalie, talk to me." Dominic's voice was a razor. "I have it. I am moving to the exit." "Wait, he's looking at you. He's not smiling." She glanced back. Kappa's eyes were narrowed. He was not looking at her. He was looking at his laptop, where his unauthorized device removal warning was now flashing. He stood up, knocking over his chair. "Go!" Dominic yelled. "Go, now!" She did not run. She walked faster, blending with the crowd, pushing through the dance floor. She heard a shout behind her, but it was lost in the music. She hit the service corridor, burst out into the alley, and fell into the open door of the van. Dominic slammed the door, yelling "drive" before she was even fully inside. He did not ask if she was all right. He ripped the shawl from her arm, grabbed the device from her hand, and shoved it into the van's integrated computer. "You are hit," he demanded, his hands checking her shoulder. "No, I am fine. Did we get it?" He stared at the screen as the data downloaded. His face was pale. The file directory opened, insurance, accounts, roster. He clicked roster. A list of names filled the screen, dozens of them, men she had seen at the estate, men who had guarded them. It was not a leak. It was an infestation, 30% of his organization. Dominic did not speak. He just stared. His hands clenched so tight his knuckles were white. The van sped through the night, the only sound his ragged, furious breathing. They did not speak until they were back in the secure room. The data was on the main server. The war was inevitable. It was 4 a.m. The city was silent. Dominic stood by the window, a single glass of whiskey in his hand, staring at the list on the screen. Natalie, having changed into a simple t-shirt and sweats, her shoulder aching, walked up behind him. The adrenaline was gone, leaving only a deep, profound exhaustion. She placed her good hand on his back, feeling the tension in his muscles. He flinched, then leaned into her touch. "He was my father's best man," he whispered, pointing at a name. "Angelo. He taught me to ride a bike." He turned, the glass forgotten. The mask of the boss was gone, in his eyes. She saw only the lonely king, his castle walls crumbling from within. "You were extraordinary tonight," he said, his voice thick. "I just did what I was trained to do," she replied. "No." He reached out, his hand gently cupping her jaw, his thumb stroking her cheek. "You did what we had to do." He drew her in. This was not the desperate, frantic kiss from before the mission. This was something new. It was slow. It was deep. It was a kiss of profound, staggering relief. His lips were soft, searching, a quiet exploration. It was a kiss of gratitude, of awe, of a shared, terrible intimacy. He pulled her against him, his arms wrapping around her waist, holding her as if she were the only solid thing in his world. He buried his face in her hair, inhaling deeply. For 10 minutes, he murmured against her skin, his voice muffled. When Kappa looked at you, my heart stopped. I was not a boss. I was not in control. I was just a man, watching the only thing in the fire. She tilted her head back, forcing him to look at her. We are not in the fire anymore. Dominic, we have the truth. We have the list. They are exposed. You are not afraid, he said, a look of wonder on his face. I am terrified, she said honestly, her hand coming up to rest over his heart. But I am not alone, and neither are you. He held her, just held her. In the quiet of the pre-dawn light, the war was coming. The battle would be bloody. But in this one, sweet, stolen moment, in the safety of each other's arms, they had already won. The war was not a single explosion. It was a series of precise, brutal and silent cuts, armed with Kappa's list. Dominic had spent 3 days cleansing his organization. He moved with a speed and ruthlessness that terrified his own men. Traitors were summoned to meetings they never left. Accounts were frozen. Safe houses were purged. The message was unequivocal. The king was not dead, and he was taking back his throne. Now, only the head of the snake remained Marco Russo and Leo Kappa. They were holed up at a decommissioned naval yard in Brooklyn, a fortress of rusting steel and shadow. They had pulled in their remaining forces, a mix of Russo's terrified men and the last of Dominic's traitors. They knew he was coming. They were waiting for a siege. They were not prepared for an infiltration. It was just after 3 o'clock in the morning. A thick fog rolled in off the East River, clinging to the cold concrete. They're expecting an army, Dominic said, his voice a low growl in Natalie's ear. They were in a dark, empty warehouse a 1/4 mile from Russo's command center, geared in black tactical armor. They're watching the gates, the water. They are not watching the ground beneath their feet. He pointed to a blueprint. The old steam tunnels. They run from here directly under their main building. They'll be dark, half-flooded, and clear. It's a 2-person job. You and me, she stated. It was not a question. You and me. He checked her armor, his hands lingering for a moment on her injured shoulder. You're sure? She looked at him, her eyes clear in the gloom. They put a bullet in me. Dominic, I am going to be there when we give it back. They moved through the tunnels like wraiths, the only sound the drip of water and their synchronized breathing. They emerged into the basement of Russo's stronghold, a vast, cold room filled with electrical breakers. Kappa is on the 3rd floor. He's running the command center. Russo is in his office on the 5th. We split. Dominic said, We cut off the head, the body dies. No, Natalie said, her voice firm. We stay together. You are the target. They will separate us. That is the trap. We go up together, we take Kappa. We get his tactical data, then we go for Russo. He looked at her, a spark of pride in his eyes. She was not his subordinate. She was his partner. Together. They took the stairs, 2 shadows moving with lethal grace. They dispatched 2 guards with silent, practiced efficiency, Natalie's good arm and a combat knife moving as one with Dominic's brutal, close-quarters power. They reached the 3rd floor. It was a hive of activity. Men with rifles, maps on tables, screens showing the perimeter, and in the center, Leo Kappa, yelling into a phone. He is not coming. He is a coward, Kappa roared. He's right here, Dominic said, stepping out of the stairwell. The room erupted. It was not a firefight. It was a short, vicious, and desperate brawl in a confined space. It was 10 men against 2. But those 2 were Dominic and Natalie. Natalie moved, her injury forgotten, her body fueled by a pure, cold rage. She was a whirlwind of motion, her movements economical, her strikes precise. She fought not like a soldier, but like a predator. She broke one man's arm, used him as a shield to block a shot, and put a knife in the man who fired. Dominic was a force of nature. He was not precise. He was a battering ram. He fought with the fury of a betrayed king. his fists and his weapon a blur of devastating power. They cleared the room in less than 20 seconds. Only Kappa was left, his face white with terror, his hand fumbling for his pistol. It was just business, Dom," he stammered, backing away. "You put a bullet in her," Dominic growled, advancing on him. "That wasn't business. That was personal." Dominic grabbed Kappa, lifting him off the floor by his shirt and slammed him against the wall. And that was when Marco Russo appeared in the doorway from the floor above, flanked by 6 more men. "Drop him, Dominic, or I drop you." Dominic froze, his hands still on Kappa. He was exposed. "You see, Dom," Kappa spat, blood in his teeth, "you are still slow, you are still all heart, and it is going to get you killed." Kappa's hand, hidden by Dominic's body, flicked. A small, gleaming stiletto appeared. He drove it, hard, into Dominic's side, just under the armor plating. Dominic roared, a sound of pure agony, and threw Kappa away. He staggered back, his hand flying to his side, his pistol clattering to the floor. He was wide open. Russo smiled. "Good work, Leo. Now, kill him." Russo's men raised their rifles. Kappa, his face a mask of triumph, picked up Dominic's fallen gun and pointed it at his former boss's head. "It is over, Dom," he sneered. Natalie had been on the other side of the room, securing the tactical laptop. She had seen it all. The knife, the dropped gun, the moment of triumph on Kappa's face. She had no fear. She had no panic. She had only a single, blazing, an absolute thought mind. She did not shout. She did not try to distract him. She moved. She crossed the 20 feet of open floor in a dead sprint, a black-clad blur of motion. She was not a soldier. She was not a ghost. She was pure, undiluted passion, a physical manifestation of love as a lethal force. Kappa heard her at the last second. He turned, his eyes wide, his finger tightening on the trigger. He was too late. She did not try to disarm him. She did not try to wound him. She slammed into him with her entire body, her good shoulder connecting with his chest like a freight train, her left arm, the one that was supposed to be weak, that was supposed to be in a sling, came up, her hand locked around his throat. They crashed through a plate glass map table, a shower of glittering shards. She landed on top of him, her knees pinning his arms, her hand still crushing his windpipe. He stared up at her, his face turning purple, his eyes bulging with disbelief. He saw no fear in her. He saw no hesitation. He saw only a cold, beautiful, and terrifying promise. She looked down at the man who had tried to kill the center of her world, and she felt nothing but the powerful, savage, and absolute rightness of her love. This was her. This was who she was. She was a protector, and this was her place. She did not kill him. She held him, her fingers a vice, until his eyes rolled back and his body went limp. She looked up. Russo and his men were staring, frozen. They had come to kill a mafia boss. They had not been prepared for her. She heard Dominic grunt. He was on one knee, his hand pressed to his side, but he was picking up another weapon. He looked at her, amidst the glass and the unconscious form of his betrayer. His eyes were not in pain. They were burning with an intensity that had nothing to do with the fight. It was awe. It was possession. It was love. "Now," he growled, getting to his feet, his voice a raw command. "It is our turn." He opened fire, and Natalie, rising from the broken glass, picked up her own weapon and stood beside him. The naval yard was silent, save for the distant cry of gulls and the drip of water. The fog was beginning to lift, revealing the grim tableau of the battle. Russo and his men were secured, their short-lived rebellion crushed. Kappa, unconscious and bound, was a testament to a deeper, more cancerous rot that had finally been excised. Dominic stood on the loading dock, his hand pressed tight to the bleeding wound in his side, his breath coming in ragged gasps. The adrenaline was fading, and a cold, nauseating pain was setting in. He looked at the chaos, the bodies, the spent shells, and for the first time, he felt no triumph in victory. He just felt tired. Natalie was at his side in an instant. Her face was smudged with grime, her shoulder a map of agony, but her eyes were clear. "You're bleeding. Heavily. We need to go. Now." She was the one who pulled him toward the car. She was the one who applied pressure to the wound with a discarded tactical rag, her one good hand strong and steady. She was the one who, as their car sped away from the battlefield, did not look back. The doctor, the same one who had treated her, worked in the sterile medical bay beneath the penthouse. He was efficient, silent, and stitched the deep gash with practiced skill. Dominic had refused anesthesia, his eyes never leaving Natalie, who stood in the corner of the room. He needed the pain. He needed the clarity. Later, in the hours before dawn, he stood in the penthouse living room. The room was still a wreck from the first attack, the marble bar still chipped, the windows still boarded up. He had not had it fixed. He needed the reminder. He held a glass of whiskey in his hand, but had not taken a drink. He was looking at his reflection in the dark, bullet-streaked glass. The man looking back was not a king. He was a survivor, and he was not sure if that was enough anymore. Natalie came up behind him, her bare feet silent on the floor. She had showered, changed into a simple t-shirt and sweats. She did not touch him, but he felt her presence, a solid, grounding warmth at his back. "Kappa woke up," she said quietly. "He's in the holding cell. He's talking." Dominic nodded, his gaze fixed on the dark city. "It does not matter what he says. I already have the answer." "The list," she said. "The war," he corrected, his voice a low rasp. "My father built this empire. He told me it was about power, about respect. He was wrong. It is about this." He gestured to his bandaged side, to the boarded-up windows. "It is a snake, eating its own tail, forever." Kappa turned. Angelo, a man who held me as a baby, turned. "For what?" "A few more dollars, a piece of Russo's ruined pie. We won. Natalie. And what did we win? A pile of bodies and a list of new enemies who will rise up tomorrow." He finally turned to face her. His eyes, usually so cold and controlled, were raw. "You took a bullet for me. You ran into a room of armed men for me. You showed me what it means to fight for something, and I have been fighting for this." He looked around the room in disgust. "This is not an empire. It is a cage." He set the whiskey glass down, untouched. The sound of the crystal hitting the wood was a sharp, definitive click. "So I am burning it." Natalie's eyes widened. "Burning it." The organization, the name, the entire rotten structure. He took a step toward her. "I am done. The war is over. I am cutting out the cancerous parts, which I have discovered is almost all of it. I am letting the street trash fight over the scraps." "And then what?" she whispered. "And then, the future," he said. A new, strange lightness in his voice. "The legitimate businesses, the logistics company, the real estate holdings, the things I built that were clean, the things that were real. I am going to build that. That will be my empire, a real one. One that does not require men with guns in every doorway." He stopped, standing directly in front of her. He looked down at his hands, a king's hands, bruised and bloodied. Then he looked at her. "But I have been a tyrant for so long. I have forgotten how to build. I only know how to conquer. And I will not, do it alone." He reached out, his hand hesitating. He did not touch her face or her waist. He gently, carefully, touched the silk sling that still supported her healing shoulder. "You are a weapon, Natalie. I know that. It is what brought you to me. But you are more than that. You are a strategist. You are a protector. You see the truth. You are the only person in my entire world I trust." His eyes met hers, and the raw power in his gaze was not for a boss, but for a partner. Carmine Logistics needs a new head of operations, someone to oversee everything, someone to be my right hand, someone to be my eyes, my brain, my conscience. He was not offering her a job. He was offering her a life, a new one, for both of them. Natalie looked at him, the man who was a contradiction of violence and vulnerability. She had run from her past, only to find it in him. And now, he was offering to run from his past, with her. She did not cry. Her soldier's heart had found its peace, not in the absence of conflict, but in the presence of a new purpose. She slowly, deliberately, reached up with her good hand and slid the now unnecessary sling from her shoulder, letting it fall to the floor between them. She was sore, but she was whole. "I think," she said, her voice steady, "I would be very good at that job." A slow smile, the first genuine smile she had ever seen, spread across his face, transforming his harsh features. "I know." He did not kiss her. Not then. He simply pulled her to him, his arms wrapping around her waist, his bandaged side pressing against her. He buried his face in her hair. And for the first time in his life, Dominic Carmine did not feel the weight of his crown. He just felt home. They stood there for a long time in the ruined penthouse as the first gray light of dawn began to creep over the city. The memories of the battle, the scent of gunpowder, the ghosts of betrayal, they were all still there, lingering in the shadows. They would always be there, a part of the foundation of who they were. But for the first time, as the sun began to rise, it was not an ending, it was a beginning. 6 months, 182 days since the battle at the Naval Yard. The penthouse was no longer a fortress of broken glass and boarded-up windows. It was a home. The floor-to-ceiling windows that had been shattered by gunfire were now replaced, a single, flawless expanse of glass that looked out over a peaceful Manhattan dawn. The sun, a brilliant clear gold, streamed in, illuminating polished wood floors and replacing the memory of tactical lights and muzzle flashes. Natalie stood by the window, a simple ceramic mug warming her hands. She wore a soft, gray cashmere robe, her hair falling loose around her shoulders. Her left shoulder, where the bullet had torn through, was just a faint, silvery scar. It was a reminder, not of pain, but of a choice. She was no longer watching the streets below for threats or scanning the rooftops for snipers. She was, for the first time in her life, just watching the sunrise. She heard him before she saw him, the sound of his bare feet on the floor. He no longer moved with the predatory silence of a boss, but with the quiet, sure-footed comfort of a man in his own home. Dominic. His arm slid around her waist from behind, his large, powerful hands covering hers on the mug. He pulled her back against the solid, immovable warmth of his chest. He wore only a pair of dark sweatpants, his upper body bare. A long, jagged scar ran down his side where Kappa's knife had gone in. Their scars, his and hers, were a matching set, a silent map of the war they had survived. "You are up early," he murmured, his voice still rough with sleep. He pressed his face into the curve of her neck, inhaling. "The city is quiet," she whispered, leaning her head back against his shoulder. "I like it this way." He held her, just held her, for a long minute. This was their new life. It was not the high of adrenaline and gunpowder. It was this slow, steady, and profound peace. It was a peace they had earned, bought with blood and betrayal. "The final liquidation papers for the Red Hook properties are on your desk," she said quietly, her voice pulling them gently back to the day. He grunted, his embrace tightening. "Good, sell it, sell all of it. I want the Russo name and every man who followed him erased from my books, from my city." Dismantling a criminal empire, they had learned, was almost as violent as building one. The last 6 months had been a different kind of war, a war fought not with bullets, but with lawyers, wire transfers, and leveraged buyouts. Dominic had been utterly ruthless. He had cut away the rot, section by section. He had promoted the few men, like the recovered Sal, who were loyal to the new vision, the legitimate vision, and had exiled or destroyed the rest. The Carmine name was no longer a whisper in the underworld. It was a rising, formidable force on the stock exchange. "The board meeting for Carmine Logistics is at 9, she reminded him. He sighed, his breath warm against her skin. A room full of men in $1,000 suits who think I am just another street thug who got lucky. Natalie turned in his arms, her hands coming up to frame his jaw. The morning light caught the sharp, aristocratic lines of his face. "Let them think that," she said, her voice firm. "Then show them what a man who clawed his way up from the street can do with a legitimate spreadsheet. You are not just a conqueror. Dominic, you are a builder. You just needed the right materials." He looked at her. His dark, intense eyes, the eyes that had once held only calculation and a profound loneliness, were now filled with a light that belonged only to her. "And what about you? My ghost, my strategist. Are you content with spreadsheets, with shipping manifests and quarterly reports? Is this enough for you?" A slow, genuine smile, one that still felt new to her face, spread across her lips. "My training, as you call it. It was never just about violence. It was about seeing the patterns, seeing the threat. It does not matter if the threat is a man with a rifle or a hostile takeover. The strategy is the same. I see the board clearly, especially when I am standing next to you." His gaze intensified. He lowered his head, and she met him halfway. The kiss was nothing like their first, that desperate, furious collision in the war room. This was slow. It was deep. It was sure. It was a kiss of absolute knowledge, of shared history and a promised future. His lips moved over hers with a practiced, possessive tenderness. He knew the exact way to touch her, the exact pressure that made her sigh and melt against him. His hands, large and calloused from a life she was helping him leave, roamed her back, tracing the line of her spine. Relearning her body in the morning light, there was no urgency, there was no desperation. There was only time. They had earned this. He pulled back, his forehead resting against hers. "I never knew," he whispered, his voice thick with an emotion he no longer bothered to hide. "I never knew what this felt like. Peace. It is addicting." "It is not peace, Dominic," she corrected softly, her fingers tracing the scar on his side. "It is partnership." He captured her lips again, a kiss that spoke of promises, of mornings just like this, stretching out for years. He lifted her effortlessly into his arms. She wrapped her legs around his waist, her arms around his neck, as he carried her from the window, away from the city that was waiting. Their new kingdom could wait. 2 hours later, they stood by the private elevator, the one that had been breached by traitors. It was repaired, reinforced, and gleaming. Dominic was not the man from the back booth of La Vostra. He was immaculate in a custom, dark navy suit that highlighted the power in his shoulders. He looked every inch the CEO, the titan of industry. The only hint of the man beneath was the fierce, watchful intensity in his eyes. Natalie stood beside him. She wore a sharp, tailored, cream-colored suit, her hair pulled back in a sleek, professional chignon. She was no longer the invisible waitress, the ghost. She was the head of operations. She was a queen, standing beside her king. The brushed steel elevator doors opened. "They will test you today," she said, her voice low. "They see the old name. They smell blood." "Let them," he replied, his voice calm, absolute. "We are the sharks now, not them." He held out his hand. It was not a question, not an offer. It was a simple, profound statement of fact. Natalie placed her hand in his. His fingers closed around hers, a familiar, strong grip. Together, hand in hand, they stepped into the elevator. The doors closed, and they descended toward the street, ready to face their new life. It would not be easy. The shadows of their old world were long, and building an empire from the ashes of another was a challenge unlike any they had faced. But as they looked at each other, a shared, silent understanding passing between them, they knew they would not face it alone. The ghost and the boss were gone, and in their place stood a partnership, forged in fire and built to last. Thank you for listening to our story. We would love to know where you are listening from, so please comment below to interact and share your thoughts. Do not forget to subscribe to Mafia Boss Story, like this video, and give us extra support by hitting that hype button so this story can be heard by more people.